Hey, boys and girls, weather report for July 27th, 2021, and I'm 25,770 days old today. And you know what that means? In 7 days, I'm going to reach 25,777. You remember when I was 25,666?
That's right.
777 is like the devil plus.
Or it's the number that Kent Hovind is hoping to get of people who are going to send him $30 a month.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't know how crowdfunding works.
Yeah.
By the way, just starting opposite us today, Gusset Gibbon has a premiere.
Oh no!
Part 8 of her Library of Errors, and and it's a good presentation. She gets a little frustrated with raw mat because she's going over one of the appendix chapters or whatever that they wrote. I don't know what you would call it because of the grammar and the spelling and all that stuff.
That they vomited onto a page.
Yeah, exactly. And still, that's coming.
Which book?
Why Human Evolution is False, Part 8.
Oh, let me go get that. Anyway,
the only book that matters.
Why Evolution is False. That's his latest one, right?
I'm not sure how it ranks in his output because I don't read his output.
So she's doing that right now. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. But
and then one more thing, Dark Matter 2525 just produced a video, God's Greatest Argument of All Time. So that ought to be something interesting to go look at as well.
I will link those in the description. So anyway, so should we play a little bit of this and see what comes up?
If we must.
We must. Yeah. Or
talk to you.
There's the part where he went on Smokey's channel and complained about you, but that was even more fun, maybe. But I don't know. We'll play a little bit.
I mean, I get why that would be fun, but I honestly couldn't care less whatever else Danny has to say from this point on. I just don't care. As far as I'm concerned, after today, he is going to become a non-entity.
Yeah, well, that's like I said. That's why he got tossed off the channel, not because he was wrong or because he was, because he had an idea that differed with ours, but because he could not stop from insulting people, and so I just got tired of it.
Yeah, and Brother Dapper, what do you mean by entity, by the way?
So in this case, I mean, and by that I mean very specifically, he will become for me something that is essentially identical in terms of what importance I give it to something that is not only imaginary, but that's imaginary and that I haven't heard of.
Interesting. That's pretty non-existent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how much time and effort I plan on spending thinking about or discussing with Danny after today, because it's just a waste to do anything else.
Well, in his favor, he has caused me to really think hard about natural selection and to understand why he is received as badly, him and Fodor in general, why they were received so badly by the scientific community. And there's a real gap in what we intend to do, what we intend to explain between philosophers like Danny and like Jerry Fodor, and between how we perceive biology and natural selection today. And basically him throwing a wrench in things. Now, Danny and Jack Allstrike, or whatever his name is that his name? Anstrike?
Amstrike, yeah.
Yeah, him and one other guy are the only people today, I think, that are still clinging to this Jerry Fodor thing. And Jerry Fodor, of course, died, so he can't do it anymore. And but it's interesting because it causes us to reassess. And that is the point of philosophy, and that is the point of philosophy of science. But it is so aggravating to try to reason with him about this and try to move him off of his argument. Now, he's came up with this argument in the beginning, and he has not modified it one iota.
Nor
he's still using. Go ahead.
Nor has he managed to convince anyone, and that's the thing, right? If you have an argument that's great, then I can see why you might not. Modify it.
Right.
But we're in a situation where, like, do you guys know who Mr. Intelligent Design is?
Yes.
I've heard of him.
Okay. So if you haven't, I would suggest looking up a channel or looking up a video on Jackson Reed's channel in which he hosts a discussion between Mr. Intelligent Design and Aaron Ra. Now, I'm not going to endorse everything that Aaron Ra says or does or all of his philosophical points, but Mr. Intelligent Design is a person who thinks that he has cracked the code of how intelligent design works, and he does it by saying things that no one is able to interpret in terms of meaningful content, and then claiming victory. And at one point, he's asked, has anyone ever actually agreed with you about any of this? And the answer comes back no. It's like, okay, well, then maybe it's time to reassess, because if everyone comes away saying this is complete nonsense, then either it's complete nonsense or you're just really bad at communicating it to everyone.
Right.
And that's the situation Danny's in. Except he's also more of a jerk about it than Mr. Intelligent Design, who seems very, very pleasant.
Right. Yep. Okay, let's just play a few minutes and see if we can grab something here. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you eventually, at some point, doesn't have to be here, Dapper, about natural selection. I don't know if you've heard me.
Oh, go ahead.
My argument. Oh, really?
That was my
are
first mistake.
Are you familiar with Fodor's argument?
I might be, but you're gonna have to restate it because it's late and I'm tired and yeah.
Oh, it's something like there's a big problem with natural selection as counting as a mechanism or explanation, given the fact that it's intentional and not extensional. And that's intentional with an S, not with a T. And the...
All right, I'm going to want you to define both.
Okay, so now he goes on to his explanation. But let's see, so he said there's a problem with natural selection as a explanation, or what was the other thing?
A mechanism?
A mechanism, right. And I waffled between calling natural selection a mechanism and a theory. And there are two different ways to look at it, basically. But if you look at it as a mechanism, we're saying that I think Fodor's argument is that if you look at it as a mechanism, it becomes tautological, and that the fittest survive, right?
Right.
But then when you look at definitions of natural selection, there's a couple of things that are required. One of them is copies with mutation, so variation. So there has to be variation in the population. And the other thing is natural selection happens on a population. Now, but Danny seems to be saying that the problem with natural selection is it can't explain it. From the theory, there is no law-like thing that explains whether the heart is pumping blood and that's why it was selected for, or it was making a thump-thump noise. Okay? So he talks about coextensional traits. And so, but hidden in that is the idea that natural selection is supposed to tell you which traits are going to end up in the future. And I don't think it is.
Well, there's also the fact that you can make it so that the traits are no longer coextensional artificially, and then you can figure out which one is actually causing the problem here. So, for instance, if a thump-thump noise is important for some creature's survival, like I said in the discussion, you can artificially give some organism a thump-thump noise and see whether or not it then goes on to have differential reproductive success as compared to its peers. Chances are it won't, because that's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But you never know. you never know. And that's one of the things is that when I pointed this out to Danny, it seemed like he just brushed by the fact that we could disambiguate these things in an experiment if we thought it was important enough to do it.
And I think that's the key part. The key part is that when we look at a trait, an existing trait in a population, and we look at another population that doesn't have that trait, then from there we work backwards and we use the idea of natural selection to determine why that trait may be there. And your example with the, what was it, the turtles or lizards or frogs on the beach? No, the mice. Mice on the beach, yeah. Right, yeah. Which is an actual example. They actually had this happen. Yep. And they were able to make a pretty damn good guess that trait would be selected for. And I don't understand how we could... What Danny is asking us to do is give up the idea of natural selection entirely, never talk about it, and throw it out entirely. Well, how would we explain those mice on the beach without it?
I think for some reason Danny would be happier if we just never tried to explain anything in evolution except perhaps like genetic drift.
Well, what he talks about is he says, well, it's just all random stories. And so evolution is just a story and there is no theory involved, I think is how he stated it at one time, though he would say I'm straw manning him there. But I think he's as much as said that out loud, that, it's just a bunch of stories and we can never figure out how a thing happened. But that's most of the work that's done, is figuring out how a thing happened, that sort of thing. And I think he needs better examples than the thump thing. But then I talked about the thump noise. Well, the thump noise is important in primates because that's part of the mother bonding experience, possibly. Okay. And another thing is a thump noise could make you the target of a predator with really good hearing.
So there's the second one is an interesting question. As far as the first one with bonding in primates, this is clearly something where having a heart is obviously very, very ancestral to primates, right? Like it's ancestral to like, I don't know. It's not quite chordates, but it's like maybe one step past that towards vertebrates.
Right.
So like, a heart is an extremely primitive thing. The fact that later on it was the thumping noise was co-opted by basically the nervous system and instincts in primates to form the basis of bonding doesn't say anything about why the thump noise evolved. It says something about why that particular bonding mechanism was available. So if you want to use that example, you kind of have to reverse it. Like, why was the bonding?
Exactly. Yeah.
As far as like being able to be heard by a predator, well, yeah. But the thing is, again, it's the kind of thing that we could test, right? We do experiments in evolution with macroscopic organisms to see what kinds of things in labs can cause negative or positive selection pressure. So if you introduce it in a laboratory animal that doesn't or has a quiet heart or something, you can do things to make that heart easier to hear and introduce a predator that might hunt by hearing or might be better served if it could hear better, and then maybe it can both co-evolve. And like there are options for this. And so I don't see why the fact that a trait selected for might be coextensive with another trait therefore means we can't talk about natural selection. Because even if there is some confusion as to which trait it is that's actually being selected for, we can test it by making them no longer coextensive.
Yep. So Natty Boy 2 is Danny's sock account because I banned 50 accounts by Danny. He has hundreds of sock accounts and I banned over 50 of them. So anyway, he's in the chat. But now what Danny frequently says is, you don't understand my position. And I think everybody does understand your position by now. But I don't think you understand ours.
I'm willing to say that maybe we don't understand his position because he is colossally bad at communicating it.
Yeah, well, I read the Fodor thing, and I kind of see where Fodor is coming from.
Well, let's remind ourselves that this is a person who is engaged on more than one occasion with people who are actually professional evolutionary biologists, and apparently they don't understand his position either.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't think the fault lies with any of us or with those professional evolutionary biologists. I think the fault lies with Danny's communication skills.
Yeah.
I think he has an idea in his mind about this subject, right? And I think it's probably a coherent idea, if not necessarily a correct one. Like, I think it internally is consistent in his mind. But I don't think that he has yet to be able to adequately take that idea, turn it into words, and then implant that idea into someone else's brain, which is sort of the point of conversation.
Yeah.
It's
difficult. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's also kind of a mistake to think of an organism as kind of a lump of clay that you then attach something else to, and that's the new trait you're thinking about. I think it's more realistic to think of an organism as a collection of traits self-interacting with each other, both during development and in the organism's lifetime, to make it what it is, in kind of the same way that the evolutionary history or lineage leading up to that organism or species made it what it is.
Yeah, when you look at the theory of natural selection in totality, right? You're dealing with, number one, copy with mutation. So you're dealing with variations. You're dealing with variations across a population. You're dealing with three kinds of selection. That is negative selection, positive selection, and neutral. And then you're dealing with drift. And then you're dealing with an ecology that is constantly changing, separating, bifurcating, whatever. And all of that together is the theory of natural selection. And you know, it's under that blanket. What there isn't, but then if you narrow it down to just one part of it and say, oh, it's the survival of the fittest, well, then you're way back 150, 200 years ago at the starting point where we all started from, right?
That's never been a very good description of natural selection.
No.
Even when Darwin had published that, it was still not a good, it's not Darwin's description either. And it was never a good description of Darwin's idea. It's still not a good description of anything happening in, you know, modern evolutionary theory.
Yeah, it's kind of a straw man.
Yeah.
And then now the other thing is I think Danny is stuck on coming at it from the idea that natural selection is somehow in a law-like manner supposed to tell you which traits end up in the population. And I don't think it was ever meant to do that.
Biology has very few laws, but that doesn't mean that its conclusions are therefore flawed.
Yeah.
The thing is, you can use natural selection to predict that in a current population, if, say, the environment keeps shifting in the way it is now so that you have directional selection, you can, in fact, use a natural selection to predict future morphologies. So, for instance, if we take a lot of, say, relatively large herbivores and isolate them on an island, we can predict that they're probably going to reduce in body size because of the limited resources and the fact that if you're smaller, you don't need to eat as much to reproduce, and therefore you can have greater reproductive success on less food. That's the thing that we've observed a lot of times happening. We seem to have a pretty good reason as to why natural selection would favor smaller body sizes in otherwise large herbivores. And so we also have observed it happening in the real world. There's a reason why Shetland ponies are so tiny. It's because the Shetland Isles are tiny.
Yeah. Oh, I just got distracted by Smokey in the side chat. I'm sorry.
Smokey.
So I forgot what I was going to say because I was going to say something.
Can I say something?
Oh. Go ahead.
So to add on to that, Dapper, to my understanding, basically the idea of natural selection as conceived by Darwin was originally meant to explain or supposed to explain at least mainly the amount of adaptations that we see in nature, why things are so well adapted to their environment, not necessarily or I guess partly how they got there, but kind of meant to explain why they become well adapted to their environments, not necessarily why they end up with the traits they do.
So it explained a couple of things according to Darwin. One was it explained how it is that organisms can become so well adapted to environments, especially when it seems like perhaps they didn't start in those environments and they may have started in significantly different environments. It also per Darwin, is supposed to explain the reason that species can become isolated from sister groups and become therefore two species rather than one species.
Right.
Now, I will say Darwin overstated the case in terms of speciation as to how much of that can be explained just by natural selection.
Right.
Most of speciation actually seems to be more things like genetic drift, the founder effect, neutral variation, things like that. That's a big part of separating species, more so than just the natural selection, because you can get instances where you have groups of animals that are not speciated, but that have ranges that extend across very different environments. And the morphological characters of that group of animals will change dramatically from one end of that range to the other, despite there not really being any speciation event yet. So I do think that Darwin was overstating how much natural selection played into just speciation, although we do actually have instances where it is a big part of speciation. For instance, there's an apple maggot in North America, and there are two groups of these apple maggots. One feeds on a native fruit of, I think it's the hawthorn berry in North America,
Yes.
and the other feeds on apples, which are not native to North America. They're an introduced fruit from Europe. But the thing is, hawthorn berries and apples don't come into season at the same time. And so currently, while they're physically capable of breeding, the apple maggots that feed on apples and the ones that feed on hawthorn berries no longer really interbreed in the wild. And that's because of divergent selection in the species, which is likely to eventually lead to their speciation because they're already reproductively isolated as a result of natural selection. Now, of course, maybe it's actually just that nature isn't selecting for anything, and these guys just poofed into existence, feeding on different kinds of fruit, one that was introduced recently by humans. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess that's a possibility.
But now here's the other thing about the theory of natural selection. If you reduce it in such a way that you model it on a computer, okay, it becomes a very, very rich theory with a lot of different propositions having to do with whether you have asexual reproduction, horizontal gene transfer, or sexual reproduction. And we start looking, so you bring recombination into the mix, and then you project out and you have a model species, right? And then on the other end, for the environment, you have very simple mathematical filters that tell you what the environment, how the environment is going to treat different phenotypes. And you can run that model, and you will have natural selection in that model. Though it would be very difficult to explain in any other way other than to model it, because the model has become so complex. And that is called population genetics. So natural selection is at the core of theoretical population genetics, which is not to be confused with biology. Exactly. I mean, it tells us a lot about it. But so, I mean, there's a lot to consider there, but that's where the theory really blows up, where you really start to consider all of the different copy mechanisms and different filter mechanisms and different population dynamics mechanisms, because there's a whole lot of that. And that's where you get drift and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, I mean, I don't think it is anywhere near tautological when you look at the theory from that perspective. So, and I've done a little bit of this stuff with computer programs. It becomes quite complex.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting thing in that we can watch an analog of natural selection and you can just do this at home on the internet, right? There are numerous genetic algorithms that are presented more or less as games, and you can watch the organisms naturally evolve through natural selection. And so the thing is, we can play board games as to whether or not that means it's an explanation or a mechanism. I think in science, often those two things end up being somewhat synonymous. Like, how is it that, organism X went from morphology A to morphology B? What mechanism was it? Well, it was, random mutation and natural selection for the most part. Okay, well, how do you explain that happened? And then we go into the explanation of what causes natural selection in terms of differential reproductive success. Okay, and are we using the same word for the our theory about it as well as the event? Yeah, we are. Just like I call the theory of gravity, and I call the actual thing that's keeping me stuck to the ground, gravity. And I'm sorry if that doesn't tickle your philosophical fancy, but I don't have the time to go around and every single time specify whether I'm talking about the actual physical phenomenon or the idea of in science about it. Like, I just don't have that much time. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And no one really cares that much because it's usually extremely obvious what we're talking about.
Yeah. Now, a really good example of coextensional traits are, say you had a population of bears and a certain group of them started to thrive and take over the population, and they had spotted noses. Okay. And then you looked into what was happening with the bear, and you found out that they also had an enzyme that made them much more efficient at processing seal fat or whatever, or some berry. Okay. And then you looked into the genes that were involved in both of those things, and you found out that the same gene was responsible for the spotted nose as the enzyme, which can happen. Okay.
It can.
And yeah, and then so Danny's complaint seems to be that we can't tell whether it was the enzyme or the spotted nose that made the bear more successful.
Of course we can, though.
Of course we can, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, doesn't that kind of ignore kind of the regulatory mechanisms going on as well?
Yeah. Well, there's another thing, and that happens to be linkage disequilibrium, where the gene for spotted nose could have been very, very close to the gene for the new enzyme.
Right.
And of course, we understand
that's actually
that
a more likely explanation for that kind of coextension, because a digestive enzyme is unlikely to cause discoloration on the surface of the body. It's not impossible, I suppose, but
when you start looking into embryology, it becomes more of a possibility because
that's why I said it's not impossible, but it's not the most likely would be, which actually happens in humans. The genes that code for the chin in humans are actually very close to other developmental genes that are important for things like development of the brain. And so it seems like what probably happened was at some point, these were the genes for the brain development aspects were pretty heavily selected for. And because they were in close association with the genes that make this kind of useless protuberance at the bottom of the human jaw, that also ended up fixing in the human population just because the brain development was so heavily selected for that it fixed faster than you could break that linkage block. Because linkage blocks, the linking of two genes, it's basically because they're physically near each other on the chromosome. So they're not likely to be swapped in a crossover event, which are common. And it takes time to break linked genes like that. It does happen. That's why, for instance,
millions of years often.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can also tell in some cases, how recently genes have entered the population by how closely associated they are in linkage blocks. And also you can tell how long ago different populations diverged based on how closely linked various genes are. So for instance, if you're in Ethiopia, there's linkage blocks are just kind of random at this point, basically, because the population there of humans has been there since forever, basically, since the beginning of humans. Whereas if you look at linkage disequilibrium in places like East Asia or North America, where some humans were some of the latest places where humans arrived, they have very closely associated linkage blocks that are persistent across the population. That's because there hasn't been enough time for those linkage blocks to break up. And so, now we're sort of off the topic of natural selection, but hey, you know what? Things like linkage disequilibrium are interesting.
Right.
And they're definitely a part of that copy mechanism that you have to consider. So like I say, the theory does expand, and the theory has been expanded greatly. And we still call, we can blanket that all as natural selection, or we could reduce it down to just survival of the fittest, which is tautological. But Natty says all of this is irrelevant.
Well, that's great.
He keeps saying that.
Here's the thing. I stopped caring what he actually has to say the moment he started attributing motives to people because he was bad at communicating. Yeah. So I no longer actually care about further communications from him. So sorry for you, buddy, but if you had wanted to make a case for me to actually get your argument, you had that chance. But then you lost it the minute you decided that instead of actually further explaining yourself, you were just going to be a dick.
Yep. And the clip is highlighted in the description for anybody who wants to play out the whole thing. You can see exactly where Dapper Dino became done with him.
Yep.
Andrew.
So how much more are we going to get into this, or should I move on to what my conversation, or what do you want to do?
Oh, it's up to you guys.
I'm happy to do whatever. I'm probably going to be here for another 10, 15 or so because I got other stuff I got to get done before I go live today for my show, which will be at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.
You're doing the exobiology show?
No, this is going to be Kent with Bent.
Oh,
so
Kent with Bent.
For those who don't know, Kent with Bent is a show where basically, because Kent Hovind and his associates are just such low-level trash, that we can effectively just debunk them while also just kind of hanging out with the audience and having some drinks.
I thought it was a show where you got Erica drunk.
No, that's Eric with Erica.
Oh, okay.
Right, in which we look at Kent Hovind's son, Eric Hovind.
Right, okay. Yeah, great shows. So anyway, we can switch over to a discussion. Before we leave natural selection, I want to point out that Peter Borger, a creationist who came up with the VIG idea, he changed the name of that to the Law of Natural Preservation. Anyway, it's cute.
I guess I can see why that is also a reasonable description. But look, I get it, preservation, because the things that are selected for are then still around. But the reason I don't like it that much is because selection isn't necessarily binary, right? The key is differential reproductive success. So, for instance,
right.
If let's say you have a population of just 2, like we're radically simplifying it, right? And we'll say specifically two males, right? But you have a whole bunch of females, so that way their limits to their reproductive success hinges on some aspect about things like how often they can manage to secure a mate, how much of their time they can actually spend engaging in reproductive behavior as opposed to foraging for food or evading predators or whatnot, right? And so you have a population in which one of these males ends up having 100 children and the other one ends up having 500 children. There was not a binary selection. It's not like the male with the fewer children didn't survive to reproduce. It did. The other one just did it a whole lot more. And so over time, if these ratios tend to persist, especially if the population is constrained, which normal populations are constrained in terms of their size, then eventually the genetics that are causing this, assuming it is a genetic thing that's causing this, the one that gives the high reproductive rate is going to be the one that ends up dominating in that population. But at no point was it because all the other guys just died out. It's just because they didn't reproduce as much. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't like things like survival of the fittest or other descriptions other than natural selection, because selection isn't just about survival. It's actually often not about survival at all. And it is about differential reproductive success. And all the other sort of simplifications or alternate terms, I think, just further obscure that fact.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's so much more when you look into the copy mechanism and the embryology and the filter, that the whole thing expands greatly, and it becomes ridiculous to reduce it to a tautology like that. It doesn't make any sense, but anyway, we can. So, Andrew, we could move on to your discussion with Smokey last night, which was, now discussions with Smokey have become very peaceful of late, and I'm confused. I'm confused and I'm conflicted. Now, I know Dapper Dino, you and Erica went on his channel,
along with Maddie from Science Side Up. Yep. Yeah.
And we should probably talk a little bit about that, because I'm confused and conflicted. And I would love it. Now, I used to have really good conversations with Smokey before he started calling me Speedopedo Pudding. And and I'm tempted to have those conversations again, but I'm thinking, how did it turn out last time? I don't know. I'm conflicted. Maybe you guys can help me out. I need counseling. Okay.
I mean, I don't have any advice as to whether or not you should continue after that kind of interaction. I went on there because the conversation was both in my area of interest, and because Smokey was treating everyone respectfully. And until that stops happening, I'm willing to then engage with Smokey on his channel, and that isn't a problem. But if that behavior stops, then I'll stop too, because
Well,
I don't need to go into a room where I'm going to just be personally attacked when the conversation is about ideas and not me as a person. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's he's already started a little bit, but Ted Bundy, when he was in the courtroom in Florida, he was extremely charming.
Well, that's true. But here's the thing, though, right? I'm not unwilling to have a conversation with Ted Bundy. That doesn't mean that I'm okay with the things that he's done. But if Ted Bundy wanted to have a conversation about, like, I don't know, why the Earth is old, okay, sure, I guess I'll have a conversation with him. If the topic of his past murders comes up, I'll be like, yeah, no, none of that's okay. And if we want to talk about that, it won't go well for Ted Bundy.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing is, as far as I know, also Smokey Saint isn't a serial killer, so
no, he hasn't done that. He hasn't done that yet.
That we know of.
That we know of.
So
anyway.
I actually don't think he's likely a serial killer. Not very many people are, so
Yeah, it's pretty rare. It's a rare trait. That's why I don't know if it's selected for or not. I don't know. We could apply natural selection to that, maybe.
Generally not.
Generally not.
So the thing with humans is that because they're highly social, natural selection actually tends to favor pro-social behaviors, because that makes it both more likely that you will survive to pass on your genes, but it also makes it more likely that your relatives will also survive to pass on their genes.
Yeah. A lot of serial killers had families.
I like the kind of...
Because you can hide your behavior.
Yeah. Okay. We're ready for you, Andrew.
Okay. Our one last thing I want to say about natural selection was I kind of like to think of it as the organisms that tend to reproduce, kind of leave offspring, or the ones that reproduce kind of have traits that help them reproduce, but also help them produce offspring that also have those adaptations. So I kind of like to think of it in terms of the traits they have, not necessarily in terms of how many offspring you're having necessarily. But that's just the way I view it.
Well, so the thing there is, though, that there's a reason that evolutionary biologists define fitness the way that they do. And the reason for that is that ultimately what will determine whether or not traits persist is reproductive success. So when you try to define fitness in other ways, and this is a conversation I've actually had with Sal Cordova, on whose channel the initial topic, that occurred. One of the problems I have with him is that he tends to define fitness in ways that, rather than being something that's actually going to be significant to the future of the genetics of this population or lineage, instead he tends to define fitness in ways that seem interesting to humans, but which nature doesn't really care about.
Yeah, right. Engineers particularly. And Sal and I had many discussions on fitness, and I just kicked his ass. I mean, because it didn't make sense. What he was doing does not make sense from the standpoint of population genetics or any kind of biology.
Yeah, and it seems like the YECs, a lot of them think of fitness as Gold's Gym fitness, or do you CrossFit, bro? No, that's not what they mean by fitness.
Or how well engineered the bat sonar is, or whatever, and it just doesn't make any sense. But there's one other thing I was going to say. Oh, the other thing I want to say about natural selection is, in all of my studies of genetics and biology and molecular biology, I have never used the phrase natural selection so much as I have after meeting Danny. I mean, and who has really? I mean, how often do we use the? I don't know. It just doesn't come up that often. It, as a suitcase word for a big theory, that sort of thing. Anyway, okay, I think we're done with that.
Speed. Should I get into
brother speed to you?
Brother speed.
Brother speed.
Brother.
Okay, brother Andrew.
Okay. I'm gonna. All right. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see. Everybody can see now.
Okay. So, well, first of all, Dapper, how familiar are you with different phylogenetic methods?
I'm aware of the main ones. I probably could not give you an adequate mathematical description of how they are arrived at, though.
Yeah, nor could I.
I am aware, though, that generally speaking, parsimony uses the most likely route by saying, like, okay, so if a trait only occurs in a small subset, it's more likely that they share a common ancestor that had that mutation than that it arose independently. So usually parsimony is more or less minimum changes is the way that it tends to go proceed. Now, like I said, could I give you the in-depth math there? No, but, you know.
Right. So yeah, like you said, parsimony deals with what's shown here is building all possible trees given this set of 4 taxa. And what you're doing is you're basically looking for the tree topology, the shape of the overall tree that minimizes the amount of evolutionary change, what's called the length of the tree. So you're looking for the shortest possible tree. And this gets into something I think you wanted me to talk about, Speed, about signal, right?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, I pulled this image up specifically because you have a lot of different tree topologies, and each one could be favored by different subsets of the data you're using, or the characters you're using. And what phylogenetic signal is essentially, formally, it's the degree sorry, I should say the statistical dependence of a species' trait values based on their relationships with other members of the tree. So basically, what you're looking at practically is you make all these possible trees, and certain data sets are going to support certain tree topologies over others. So you build all your possible trees, and if certain tree topologies look similar and are favored by the data, then those traits are said to have a high signal because they all support, or most of them at least, support a single tree topology. So you can measure the easiest way to measure this is in terms of the traits themselves, is what I'm saying. To think of how congruent the tree topology is at the end based on the data that you have used in your analysis.
So if you had 2 independent sets of genes, basically, that had nothing to do with each other, and the trees matched, would that be, isn't there like some statistical comparison between disparate groups of phylogenies where the trees match?
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding your example correctly, so certain traits can have high signal, meaning that it ubiquitously generates the same tree topology. But other traits, because the mechanisms that produce them can vary wildly, and this gets into something like homoplasies, for example, they would tend to have low signal. The common example I like that someone provided to me was kind of skin color around different animal groups, for example, because the pigmentation can change very quickly and kind of mostly at random. So it doesn't really depend that much, or the specific color of the skin doesn't really depend that much on how the groups you're looking at are related to one another. So that specific trait, skin color, would be said to have low signal because you could do your analysis just using skin color, and you would come up with completely different tree topologies that are very likely equally supported by the same
Right.
data.
And transposons really throw a wrench in some of that stuff.
Yeah.
As far as sorting out a tree, but
right,
which we will be getting into.
Right, but that's basically all that signal is conceptually. It's how congruent the data is in terms of what tree shape what branching order it supports.
Yeah.
So I hope that I made that a little more clear.
Yeah, I have a paper here. I don't know if I can share the source of it, but I can share the name of the paper so people can look it up. Let me see here.
Before we get into
Munkemuller?
that, did you have anything you want to say, Dapper, on any of that?
I mean, all of that is as I understand it to be.
Okay.
So I don't have any particular objections or particular questions. I do think it's a good thing to know about, because one of the things is if you have a lot of traits that seem to have high signal and then they correlate with each other, giving you similar trees, that is something that is, one, not predicted by separate ancestry, and two,
Correct.
only is really easily explainable by common ancestry. And the fact is, we do in fact have a lot of relatively high signal either character states or genetics, and they both tend to result in very, very similar trees, which doesn't have a great explanation in terms of special creation, which is
I couldn't have put it any. I couldn't have put it any better.
And I don't tend to see anti-evolutionists actually grappling with that data.
Right. Well, you know the kind of the most common, but kind of mostly the only response I get when I pull questions like this up is God just happened to make it that way. He just decided to do it that way, which
Right.
of course isn't an explanation.
It's post hoc,
right.
And it also results in a God who is, while expecting you to believe A, intentionally making the universe seem like not A is true.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm bald. I used to have hair before they started making stuff up to match the data, to match the evidence.
You haven't had hair since like the 70s.
Well, that's about it. It was 1979, I think, when I lost my hair. So
there you go.
Yep. Anyway.
Oh,
because they
I
can
feel
make
like
anything
I
if they
saw
want.
Maddox pull this paper up once.
Really?
I think
How to
so.
measure?
Wasn't it in his little phylogenetics folder that I saw once? I don't know.
Oh, it probably is. I could check for it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
doesn't understand phylogenetics.
Yeah, they run a bunch of different models. They modeled it. Okay, so they tested the signals based on the different methodologies based on model.
Right.
And they probably came up with some criticisms, right? Like right here are the different models. There's Albois or Alboufs. I don't know how you say that. Moran, Pagel, Blomberg. And there's a bunch of different tests that they use under statistical tests. And what they were doing is they were trying to find the best ones, right?
Right.
So they had some criticism. I'm sure there's a lot of cherry pickable quotes here.
Right.
Anyway.
Well,
I put that in the description.
Oh, okay. I like this one number, and if you want to say something on this step, I'd really like that too. Yeah, I'd like to see that too, Leo, if we can ever do that. Because I think I'd like to smoke him on that.
Well, Smokey is trying to set that up, right?
Oh yeah. If you can, well, Smokey left already. That's okay. Anyways, one paper I looked at, which Erica actually showed with me, I was looking into it, and I just love this number because this isn't even the worst number I've seen in terms of the p-values involved with separate ancestry. But like for primates, at least in this particular study, the p-value was about as low. It was equivalent to picking out one atom out of the known universe at random. So 1 in 10 to the 80th power chance of getting a worse fit for separate ancestry for primates.
And we know how they love probability.
That's not even the lowest number I've seen.
Yeah, probability is like where they live, right?
And so the one that kind of p-values are, you don't normally get those in studies, right? You have to be studying something that's pretty darn obviously true in order to get a p-value that's so ridiculously low that the chances are that low that you just have this by chance. And by the way, the null hypothesis for common ancestry is separate ancestry.
Right.
If a paper fails to support common ancestry, that means you do not have cause to reject the null hypothesis of separate ancestry. So that's one of the things that people seem to forget a lot, is that separate ancestry is tested routinely in biology, and it is it is essentially always rejected with extremely high confidence. The only explanation for separate ancestry still being true is that whatever is creating these things independently of one another is intentionally tricking us. There's really no other option. And I mean, if you want to believe that the God of the Bible is more like Loki than like most people would conceive of God, I mean, I'm not going to stop you.
Okay. So here's a good question for you, Dapper, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this, because they keep using this analogy of cars in terms of nested hierarchies. Have you ever responded to it? Or?
Yeah. So here's the thing about cars, right? They don't fall into nested hierarchies.
Right.
You can create a hierarchy that is in fact nested, but the important thing is it's an objectively nested hierarchy. So for instance, under every classification scheme that you can come up with that isn't arbitrary, that actually is taking a look at inherited traits of animals, say, humans will always cluster with chimpanzees more closely than they do with dolphins. You cannot come up with a hierarchy in which that doesn't happen, that is not fundamentally arbitrary. But that is not true for cars, right? So you might think that, say, a Lamborghini is very unlikely to cluster with a Vespa, as opposed to, say, a different sports car. But the thing is, I can just choose which aspects of design of vehicles are most important to me. So, for instance, I could say, well, as it turns out, the formula in the paint used by the Lamborghini company actually has strong chemical similarities to the paint used by the Vespa company when they're making their scooters. And I consider the, paint chemistry to be at the top of my list of vehicle hierarchy. And you could say, no, it should be, passenger capacity. And someone else could say, well, no, maybe it should just be, like engine design. Maybe it should go with, how many cylinders are in the engine. Or someone else could just say, well, maybe it should go by wheel size or total mass. And the thing is, all of the traits of vehicles can and are just mixed and matched because they are in fact separately designed by people who have access to the other designs that are available. And for this reason, any hierarchy you draw, which is fine to draw a hierarchy for things that aren't actually in objectiveness hierarchies, but you cannot say it is a better fit than someone else's contradictory hierarchy.
Somebody has got to get a bunch of data on automobiles and work that out and start doing some population genetics on automobiles.
Well, it's actually you can't do it with phylogenetics, but you can do it with cladistic character analysis, right? So you basically do a paleontological study on cars, essentially, right, to form a cladogram of cars. And the thing that you will find is, since we were talking about sigma, I'll relate it back. You will find that every trait in vehicles tends to have a relatively low signal.
Right.
And there are populations of cars like GM and Ford. There's different populations we could look at. I don't know.
And of course, at this point, creationists are going to point out, this is the last thing I'll say, they're going to point out these supposed major incongruencies. But I kind of have some problems with that, namely that, one, they're for lesser groups that are still being worked out, and so are part of the process of honing in where we need more data to resolve these relationships. So it's kind of more so the data isn't giving us a clear answer, not necessarily that's contradicting common ancestry. Yeah,
well, you get things like that, like, there's not a great answer as to the phylogeny of this like one group of vespids in the Amazon jungle, and it's like, okay, but that doesn't negate the overwhelming evidence for common ancestry of, say, vespids and other winged insects, or insects as a whole and the rest of crustaceans, or all of crustaceans and the rest of protostomia, or just the relationship between all bilaterians.
This might be my ignorance, but what exactly is a vespid?
Vespidae is the family to which wasps belong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
An experience with those the other day. I watered my tree, and the lawn got wet, and I went out there, and there were like 500 wasps on the ground trying to get water because it's been dry here.
It's been really rainy here.
Very dry here. For Minneapolis, that's really, really odd. We haven't had a dry year in 30 years, I don't think. So
Dapper, I know you have to get going soon, but before you do you have any final thoughts on design and phylogenetics and all that?
Yeah, there's actually, and you've inspired me here to kind of come up with a challenge that I would like some creationists to take.
Okay.
If you think that car traits form nested hierarchies, what I would encourage you to do is get as many cars as you can, establish traits like mass, length, width, number of doors, engine design, things like that, as many characteristics as you can, and put them into some of the programs that we use to come up with cladistic charts, right? So cladograms. And if you, in fact, get p-values on the same level as we get for relatedness of, say, all apes or primates or something, right? Let me know, because at that point, I will have to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe cars do fall into an objective nested hierarchy.
Right.
However, my prediction...
They do have a high signal.
Right. My prediction is that when you generate your trees, all of them are going to have a low probability, and all of your signals for all of your traits are going to be extremely low. And when that happens, explain how it is that you still think that that counts as an objectively nested hierarchy. Because remember, when we do it with organisms, when we have enough taxa and enough character traits, we get very high confidence trees especially across widely disparate taxa, right? Like, good luck getting a cladistic analysis to recover the sister group of, say, humans to be like cows or something. It's not going to happen.
They're basing the car analogy on phonetic or overall similarity, not based on nested similarities, which are used in phylogenetics.
Yeah, and by the way, that correlates with the fact that creationism is always like 30 to 40 years, or sometimes even 50, out of date, because that phonetic analysis was rejected because its goals were better achieved by cladistics and phylogenetics, and that occurred, like 40 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. And the fact is, in order to get the phonetic analysis that creationists do in things like baromenology, they have to intentionally leave out taxa and use outgroups that are likely too far out. So, for instance, you'll get creationists who are like, okay, hey, let's do a baromenological study on, say, like varanid lizards. Like, okay, cool. And then what's your outgroup going to be? And like the answer is like, well, what about I don't know, geckos? Which I'm actually pretty sure I saw that exact analysis, although I don't think it was in a paper. I think it was just a creationist giving an example. But the thing is, why would you use geckos? There are organisms much more closely related to varanids that aren't varanids that you could use to get a better signal, because of course with that you're going to get everything that's related, and then you can expand it to include that outgroup. So for instance, currently this most likely sister group for varanids is snakes, right? So you use snakes as an outgroup. Okay, great. Now you can get a nice signal for varanids. But then if you want to see how varanids and snakes cluster together, or whether or not maybe some snakes are more closely related to varanids than they are to other snakes, or something like that, right? You can then add in snakes, but then what's your outgroup going to be? Well, probably something else from Toxicophora, like iguanids or the beaded lizards from places like Sonora and other deserty parts of North America. Those are another group that are relatively close related. And then after that, you can go into things like, okay, we'll start getting into like geckos or anoles or something like that. But creationists don't tend to do that. They tend to cherry pick and pick out groups specifically so that they can get high clustering within the group in question that they think is a kind, but then ignore the fact that if they had a wider data set and used a better outgroup, they could actually then connect them to other groups that they don't want to find as connected. Because remember, when non-creationists... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, or just saying that straight out seems to be a fundamental reason why baraminology isn't really to be trusted.
Well, the thing is, the actual technique can recover pretty accurate data when it's actually not used with that kind of selection bias. So, for instance, non-creationists have managed to use actual baraminological techniques with this phonetic analysis and used wider data sets to conclude that humans do, in fact, share ancestry with other apes, and that all of dinosaurs, including birds, are one created kind, apparently. But the thing is, then the baraminologists are like, no, that's crazy. But the thing is, well, they're following your techniques. They're just using a wider data set, the kind of thing you should be doing. So, yeah, baraminology... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All of this is with molecular data, correct?
Not necessarily. Baraminology has a tendency to use character state analysis, which is not illegitimate. And part of that is just that we don't have molecular data for all of the things that baraminologists, that's not an easy word. We don't have all the genetic data for things that they would like to study. I don't know what baraminology. Yeah, that's not an easy word. Creationists get a better word. Also, your grammar there on the Hebrew doesn't work because so I don't know if you guys know, but baramin is supposed to come from the word barat and min, or mean really, which barat is the simple past third person singular form of the verb to create. So it's also the lexical form of the verb to create. So it means he created or she created. But the thing is that classically Hebrew is a verb subject object language, like many Semitic and generally Afro-Asiatic languages are for their default word order, which means the phrase barat min without the direct object marker that Hebrew has to disambiguate this, which that phrase doesn't have because that word isn't there. It literally means a kind created, not a created kind. Further, if you want to use a verb as a passive participle, you don't get to use the simple active third person singular present tense form of the verb. That's not how it works. You actually have to go and get the passive participle. But even then, you would still apply it after mean because you're giving it adjectivally, which, like in most languages, Hebrew adjectives follow the noun they modify. So creationists get better at the language that your favorite book is written in.
This Peter Borger paper I have, he has 3 papers. He has gotten really good at basically co-opting all of evolution, particularly transposons, and sort of kind of claiming it for creationism. But anyway, he comes up with the idea of the baranome, which is supposed to, it's just, we're going to go over this paper or these 3 papers, I think, on paper trails. And it's just a really rich bit of information about creationism. Now, Standing for Truth and Ramat keep complaining that we aren't attacking, that we are not up to date with their literature. Well, I think this paper here, which is from, I think it was from a while ago, well, 2019. So
I'm just going to say,
yeah,
it's a little ironic to me that the group of people whose idea of up to date includes like 50-year-old papers are complaining that their intellectual opponents haven't read the papers that came out like last month. It's just like, guys.
Yeah, like Sal Cordova with the Brady paper from 1979.
Oh, is that when that paper is from? That
yes.
makes me less inclined to read it, but I'll still probably read it.
Right.
Because honestly,
it's 30 pages long, I think.
Yikes.
We need to come up with a lexicograph or a lexicon of words that creationists stole or created. You know, concepts they took from evolution and made their own word for, which I think is the idea is that somebody might hear that word and say, I wonder what the scientific view of this is. And there it is. It's on the internet and it's all written by creationists. So I don't know if they're trying to keep their little loop or their bubble tight or why they're just creating their own words.
The problem I have is I have to read real science, and they're putting out stuff like every day. I mean, just tons of papers every day.
Yeah.
And who the hell can keep up with where they're at? And all they seem to be doing, like this guy here, all he talks about is actual evolutionary mechanisms that we've been talking about for 20 years. Yeah. And then he's claiming that, oh, this is how God did it. And so he's...
I'm going to have to get going.
Okay.
By the way, Speed, if you could send me that paper, that does actually look like an interesting paper that I would want to read. Mostly because despite the fact that this is a 13-year-old paper, I have yet to see creationists using this term baronome, and I wonder if it's because it's like even the paper isn't good. I'm curious as to why this idea didn't penetrate, because quite frankly, just reading the description that I saw up there, it looked like a better thought out version of created heterozygosity than what
it really is. Yeah, it is. He's actually very good. And I'll tell you what, I'll send you a link to the Horseman directory. Inside of there, we have a papers directory, which where I've stored about 1,100 papers. And if you just look up Borger, Borgr, I named it Borger 2008. And you'll find all three of them. I'll make sure I upload them today.
Okay, cool.
And I'll send you a link. So the Horseman directory is only for atheists. Don't share it with anybody else. And it's
well, then
basically
are you sure you should share it with me?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Whatever you are, you're not a pseudoscientist.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, Dapper does not claim to be an atheist. He keeps his personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs private, and so by us sending him a link, we're not claiming that he is an atheist.
Yeah, don't share it with any pseudoscientists.
Okay, I can make that promise.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Dapper. Before you go, I just want to say thanks for the little phylogenetic discussion we had. I really enjoyed that, and I
did
hope
too.
we can talk again sometime in the future.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. And thank you to everyone here for not ascribing to me motives that they can't know that I had.
I typically assume your motives are purer than mine.
The only reason you came here is to promote my channel.
That's right. Everybody, subscribe to. We're going with Answers in Atheism is the name now because it's changed, isn't it?
Yep, it has changed. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you for having me on, and you guys have a wonderful day. And hey, check out my show later. It'll probably be after this one.
Yep.
We always
There's a link in the description.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Dapper.
Bye.
Okay. So should I open it up to the side chat?
Sure,
Absolutely.
but you have to take the paper down because I want to see my face or my icon.
You want to see your face?
Or his icon.
Oh,
you like that icon, huh?
I guess you do. I'm sorry. Sorry.
If anybody comes in, they got to come in as brother, whoever.
Yeah, you got to come in as brother, whatever. You don't get in the door.
Yep, brother and
that was
we're all brothers in atheism.
Yep.
Ooh, there's a channel idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me talk phylogenetics with Dapper Speed, Brother Speed.
Brother Speed.
That was a fun discussion.
I don't think we're done yet. There's one other thing I wanted to cover.
Okay.
And that is, let me see here. Oh my God. Okay. Oh my goodness. I wanted to talk about this just a little bit. And Danny made a pretty good point here, actually, at one point. Okay, let me undo that so you can see your icon. Okay.
Do you think that spontaneous generation, let's say if it occurred multiple times, and then you had all these different lineages, that would falsify evolutionary mechanisms?
Okay, I'm back. Is that to me, Danny? I'm sorry.
No, it was to Andrew.
Oh, okay. Apologies.
So the way I'm going to word this is going to be a little weird. I would say that it doesn't falsify evolutionary mechanisms, but it would falsify common ancestry if you do that analysis.
Why would it?
Okay, so that was about all we needed. So anyway, so the idea is that it gets bushier when you go back below multicellular animals.
Right.
And we can look at common ancestors probably within multicellular animals. But prior to that, there was a whole lot of knocking about going on where we ended up with bush populations. Like, for instance, in the very early cells, they could have been, I think it was Damer and Deemer, who pointed out that it was like a bag of chemicals, and then they divided, and they divided again, they multiplied and divided again and again, and there could have been many different sources for the populations, and the populations were mixing tremendously. And among prokaryotes, they still do with horizontal gene transfer. Yep. And a number of other mechanisms. But then when we get into multicellular animals, that's where the common ancestry becomes. And the interesting thing is that creationists are claiming the same thing, that there's a tree. But right. The tree ended at 6,000 years ago. So they won't go beyond a certain point. But we're going back further. But when we get to prokaryotes, we are not claiming, like Cell Cordova, for some reason, cannot wrap his head around the idea that protein families did not have one single ancestor. Right. He thinks all proteins had to evolve from one protein. And for some reason, he thinks if they don't, that falsifies evolution. But that isn't the way it happened. So
right. And here's the most important thing. However far back to the root of the tree of life you go, it's always everything is related more so than creationists would agree with.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, just wanted to point that I was listening last night, and it seems it's very, very difficult for the creationists to get their mind around this idea that there were basically whole populations that were intermixing to a point, and there wasn't one single Eve, right?
Yeah.
Or Adam back there that ended up being the source of all eukaryotes. It could have been.
You know what their response is going to be is that a population would be even more difficult to arise under abiogenesis. That's going to be their usual response.
Actually, it's far more likely that way. And that's kind of why my thinking has very much slid over into that massive population of what are there, 10 to the 40th, or I think 10 to the 50th prokaryotes out there right now.
Oh wow.
And yeah, something like that. It's an amazing amount, and I think that's just on the surface of the ocean. But there's a lot of them. How many
so Speed, where would you say Sal's stance would be when it comes to how much of evolution, he denies it all, let's say if you asked him the question, if we had a video camera and we could go back and take a picture of, life arising or however it all happened, what would you see? Would you see man just poofing into existence and then another poof and the rib comes out of Adam? And I mean, that's what he would say. And so basically, doesn't that eliminate all of evolution? Or where does he stand?
Well, when the bunnies jumped off the ark, they evolved into when the kitty jumped off the ark, it evolved into tigers, lions, cheetahs.
Right, but what about before that?
Before that, it was poofed. The kitty was poofed.
Everything was poofed.
Yeah, poof.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Smoke.
I guess that would be his answer. I don't.
Yeah.
They all have some sort of. Yeah, they all have some sort of different scenario, I guess. It just depends on who you talk to, right? I don't know. They're too hard to figure out.
I know.
Anyone know if Leo was still around?
He might be, but we have. I opened the chat up, so the link is in the chat. We got about 30.
If he does, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We got about 30, 40 minutes left, and
okay.
Erica has a show right now ongoing. I think that's where everybody is.
Yeah. Well, if Leo does join, I'd like to discuss some physics with him. Mwahaha.
Oh, no.
Don't forget Erica's is
Again?
a premiere, so people can just watch that after the fact, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's a premiere. It's not an actual live, right?
Yeah, but it's premiering now. So
Right, yeah.
I also saw. Actually, I think SFT would be live right now with John McKay or whoever that is.
Again? Yeah.
Yeah, or something like The Final Proof of Design, or I think that's the title. I have no idea what it's about.
Oh, that reminds me, Andrew. We were in side chat, and you were having that conversation with Redefine Living. Yeah, that guy's a joke, huh?
Yeah, he doesn't like answering questions.
Yeah. I mean, well, I always refer to him as a Walmart version of TopDawg, and the reason why I mean, this is going way back. He basically presented his argument. He was arguing with an atheist, I think, on Praise's channel, and he was basically his arguments are very similar to Darth. The precept crap, and you can't know anything. You can't know anything unless you know God, basically, right?
Yeah, his favorite question nowadays is, can you defend your worldview of atheism? And I'm just thinking, like, why do I need to defend a doubting position? You don't need to defend the doubt of a claim. You need to prove the claim to begin with.
So, Speed, you're probably the most qualified when it comes to natural selection. Can you answer me this question? Speed is
yes, he is in the back room.
Does natural selection select truth or falsity?
That question.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I'm gonna boot you.
Yeah, that's the question. He asked me. He asked you that question too, didn't he, Andrew? I thought
he did.
Who?
And
okay,
I'm like,
I missed who you're talking about. Who's the Walmart?
Redefine Living. Remember, he came on this channel a long time ago. Remember?
Oh yeah,
Redefine Living.
He literally asked, "Does selection select for truth or falsity, or does it select for survivability?" And I'm like, neither.
Yeah, I know. The guy's a friggin' moron. I mean,
was it on this channel that he asked that?
No, he just asked Andrew and me yesterday.
Oh, on Smokey's channel or where?
No, on SFT, Standing for Poops.
In chat or?
Yeah, it was in the side.
Yeah, in chat.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Anyway, all you need to know about natural selection is Danny's in the back room.
Oh, okay.
That's all you need to know. I don't know if I should bring him in or not. It depends on whether or not he wants to come in and talk about other things, or if he's going to meet me and talk to me about natural selection in our own one-on-one show. Let's find out. Inquiring minds want to know, are you going to have a conversation with me or not?
I already had multiple conversations with you about it.
Well, are you going to have another one?
Maybe you should bring in CRISPR or Leo or someone that can
No, just me and you.
I don't. Well, look, you have a history of being dishonest with me.
Okay, that answers my question. So, anyway, what else up, guys?
Yep.
No. I had some physics, but I was hoping Leo could join because he could probably help me explain it.
I think Leo's over watch. I think nobody should watch this channel. Everybody should go to Guts at Gibbon and watch their premiere.
Yeah.
Please.
We're over to not. You didn't mean Leo's channel. Leo's channel?
No,
Standing for Poops.
No, Guts at Gibbon.
Don't go over to Pine Creek's channel. Go over to Guts at Gibbon.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because Pine Creek's live too.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, should I share my random physics fact?
Brother Scott, are you okay?
Oh
brother,
no.
brother Speed, thanks for your inquiry. That's
Concern.
very kind of you, but I just I'm doing okay.
Okay.
Sounded like you were just blessed,
Yeah.
brother Scott.
Yes.
Bless you, brother Scott.
Thank you,
Yes.
brother David. Thank you, brother
Well,
Speed.
Hope you feel better, Brother Scott.
Thank you,
Everybody
brother.
pray for brother Scott.
Yeah.
He's got the COVID.
Yeah.
I just had a little cough. That's all. A little
Nope.
drainage.
No, you got the COVID. You got it.
Okay, so I actually found out recently this kind of bizarre fact about a certain math of special relativity. So this isn't general relativity. This is 1905 special relativity. Basically, kind of the total distance, if you want to think about, or I guess more precisely, the interval between two events in space-time. It's actually weird that when you think about like the Pythagorean theorem, for example, you think of a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you're basically adding together the squares to get the total distance between point A and point B. Whereas, okay, you can apply that to, instead of two-dimensional space, you can apply that to three-dimensional space. So now you just have x, y, and z. So x squared plus y squared plus z squared equals the total distance squared. Now, in terms of space-time, in special relativity, now you have to take into account the time dimension. And
Right.
the total distance is now those three numbers squared minus the speed of light times time squared. So what that means is that this is basically where you get the idea that the more you travel through space, the less you travel through time. And for example, if the total distance is 0, that means that you're traveling at the speed of light, because the amount of distance you're traveling through space is equal to the amount of space you're traveling through time. That's why they cancel each other out. And that's why technically light doesn't travel any distance in space-time, which is weird to think about. But this is also one reason why, in a sense, the what are called geodesics are kind of the equivalent of straight lines in curved space-time.
Yep.
And they can be thought of in terms of the shortest path through space, but due to this negative sign, in terms of the time component, you can also think of them as the longest path of proper time. Proper time in this case being, if you were to carry a watch with you on your journey through space-time, how many clicks would it measure? Basically, how much time would elapse along your journey, depending on how you're moving. So I just found it interesting how, in a sense, I was watching this video. Have you guys heard of the channel Minute Physics?
I have not.
Yeah.
Nor have I.
Okay.
I have.
Everyone should go check out that channel.
Oh, yes. It's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may have seen it. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but yeah, continue.
Oh my God. I thought everybody knew about that.
As a matter of fact, I saw that and I think I remember that channel. I was going to check it out and I never did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, the video I'm referencing is called, it's one of his earlier videos called "How Far Is Tomorrow?" Where basically, this is kind of counterintuitive, but he defines how far away something is by how hard it is to get to it. That kind of makes sense. The farther away something is, the harder it is to get to it in a particular amount of time. But in this case, in space-time, because of this negative time component in the distance equation, what you find is that, in a sense, getting somewhere in or going to a castle for a party that is 1 mile away, getting there in an hour is closer in this sense than getting there in the mile in 5 minutes, because it's harder to get somewhere faster than it is to get there at the same distance slower, if that makes sense. So it's really counterintuitive, but again, it's because of this negative time component, and how the amount of distance you travel through space is kind of counterbalanced by the amount of distance, quote unquote, you travel through time. So what do you guys think about that?
Cool.
I like it. Have you read? Okay, Andrew, are you familiar with Roger Penrose's book Road to Reality?
Nope.
Oh, he really gets into the Pythagorean theorem in the beginning, and then he gets into Hilbert space. It's a wonderful book. It's a tough read.
Okay.
But it is just a really wonderful book to explain a whole lot about physics.
Do not mention that theory, Speed, because you may trigger Sal.
Why? Really?
Pythagorean theory? Yeah. Yeah.
That triggers him?
Oh, yeah.
Which theory?
Really?
Just mention it. Right? Isn't that the one that he freaked out about?
What's the theory again?
No, it was Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. It was the other one. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I got it wrong.
No mention of Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, I got it mixed up. Yep.
And that reminds me.
My mistake.
Has anyone seen the latest? Oh my God, Saul Cordova hits back on Canadian Catholic.
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
Oh, you're the one that sent it to me, right, David?
Yeah.
Okay. Saul Cordova hits back.
Yeah.
That was fun. Yeah. Where does he? Hang on a second here. Oh shit! Well, damn it. So
Leo liked it because I think he mentions Leo's name in it, doesn't he? I think he says something. I think
it's muted.
He must. I know, but hang on a second. I'm trying to find the right spot.
He was going to get his books right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Sal, are you wanting to debate with somebody on evolution?
Can you hear it?
Yep.
What's going on? Is he going to pull the books out again for Blue? He's actually going to pull out the books again to the screen.
Canadian Catholic can't believe it.
Pull out the books. I had to stop sharing the screen for a second just to show this. What's up, Randy?
No, Randolph.
I'm joking.
Okay, where's the part that he got triggered? Okay, he got triggered when Blue said this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the comment that triggered him.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or wait a minute, did I get the part where he tore off? Okay, we got to get the whole thing. Here we go. I think this is.
Blue wanted to say. Can you read the screen? Blue wanted to tell you.
It's from Blue, and it says, "Not knowing what vector spaces are is somewhat suspicious."
All right, Blue. Why don't I read this to you? You're getting under my skin here.
I'll continue, especially for someone who claims to have studied mathematics or physics. Okay. I'm just trying to be objective in reading it out.
Okay,
Sal, are you wanting to debate with somebody on evolution? Because I know some people.
Right back, Blue.
Wait, what's going on? Is he going to pull the books out again for Blue? He's actually going to pull out the books again to the screen.
Isn't it vector spaces
I
like
can't believe he's going to do this thing.
college level physics?
I had to stop sharing the screen for a second just to show this.
It's kind of like.
No, Randolph.
I'm joking. Oh my gosh, is he actually going to pull out the books right now? I can't believe this is happening. He's actually going to pull it. I mean, I own a huge library. Well, like over
I'm going to suggest that he's got a lot of bookshelves there. I'm going to suggest that he make a mention to Leophilius. Hey, Sal.
Oh my gosh, he actually brought the books. Are you actually getting the books out?
Sal, when you do this, can you maybe just
let him do it? Let him do his thing.
No, wait, no, let me talk first.
Okay,
Sal, for one of these books, can you just say, and this one's for Leophilius?
This one's for Leophilius.
I can't believe Sal is actually pulling out the books.
Oh, that's great.
A vector space. Okay, this is how. I'll tell you what a vector space is, and you're expecting me to, Blue, to know this like off the top of my head, and it's been like 30 years. a vector space or linear space V over a field.
Okay, so now he reads for what, 5 minutes?
Yeah, Canadian Catholic couldn't get him to stop. He's like,
He reads the
okay,
entire.
enough. You're gonna stop now. We get the point.
Yeah, he reads the entire thing.
X and V.
He's
VS4
still
for each
going.
element.
So he reads the entire formal definition of a
equals
vector
AX
space.
plus AY.
Which is, oh my God, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you, David. It just made my day. It was holy shit, does he get mad? I mean, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, ask him if he knows what vector spaces are. Next time you go on his stream, Andrew, ask him, or brother Andrew.
Oh, no.
No, please.
I don't know if I can do that.
Oh, come on.
He's gonna ban me.
Yeah, that would probably get you banned. Yeah, it might. There's a good possibility. Yeah.
Okay, that's linked in the description, boys and girls.
Yeah.
we love our links.
Poor Sal, he gets very emotional, doesn't he?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I think this whole thing started out. He wasn't really questioning whether he had degrees. He was questioning whether he knew what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm not going to dig a hole deeper with Cell, but R4 really, that should have just been, I don't know. Okay, I'll shut up. Anyway, shit.
What now?
I don't know. We got nothing, man. We got nothing. We should quit.
Oh my God, you kidding me? We got all kinds of.
So since I told everybody to go watch Erica, I lost 6 viewers. So we're down to 10. So we covered a lot of shit today. So I thought we did a good job.
Yeah,
10 lovely, loyal, very intellectually curious viewers.
Yes, 10 of them, and we love whoever in the hell you are. John Maddox, Praise, SFT. We love you too. Brother Praise, Brother Maddox, and Brother SFT.
Subscribe to Better Speed. We have cookies.
Yeah, Brother Speed.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned, Quantum John. We will cover you. I promise.
Well, we're definitely going to cover him tomorrow. Man.
Yeah, keep pushing for that. Yep.
Yeah, it's going to take like 3 hours to cover all the things I got to cover about John Maddox tomorrow. So definitely tune in for that.
Yeah.
Someone just came from Erica's stream.
Oh, really?
Oh, right.
Reverse. Oh, wow. Hi, Don. Anyway, we were about to end the show because everybody's going over to Erica's stream because I told them to.
Yeah.
Oh, we got 11 watching now, so that's you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hit the like button for me, just for the hell of it. Anyway, you can watch it on record. I think we're going to end for the day. What do you think?
So, Andrew, before we go, I would like to put it in on air that I really think you should keep out Smokey with your phylogenetics. I think that if you keep working on them, you'll convince them.
I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to have. Go ahead.
Oh, I was done. Sorry.
Oh, I'm going to have a conversation with Smokey, I think, about why I believe in evolution. Because sometimes when you say it out loud, you tend to sort your thoughts out, and I think I should sort them out. But I mean, all the things I hear where they come back against evolution, all I hear is all the places where that explain why I believe in evolution. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation. So.
I'll pretend I'm not looking at you.
Not looking at your dog?
Yeah, so that he'll eat. He's the little scared one.
Oh, if you look at him, he won't eat? That's amazing.
Yeah, I have to pretend I don't know he's over there eating.
There's also linked in the description, as are many other things. I think we got about 10 links today. And I keep encouraging people to use these links in the future to look up what was happening, on any particular day. So,
yeah,
anyway.
I got something I want to discuss with Smokey too. I think he's got the best. I think he's got the best bet to convert anybody out of all the freaking as far as like
convert him to theistic evolution, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely got to come full circle with the evolution and old Earth and all that, because some of it he's on the fence. He is old Earth, but there's certain, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he believes
whatever part I can play in that, I'd be glad to.
Yeah. I don't think I have this wrong, but I think what he believes in is little nudges along the way. And, that would be continuing creation along the way. And that is also an kind of an old Earth position, where there wasn't just one miracle. There were a little direct, like if you pray today, you can make a change in how humans behave or what happens to humans, right? So there's a constant theistic interference in the course of evolution in mankind. But I would I'd actually like to find out if that really is his position. I think he indicated that. But, if somebody was saying it's a dichotomy, either you believe it all happened with the Big Bang, or you believe it happened, with at one point with creationism. And I think it was him, but it might have been somebody else that said, no, that's a false dichotomy. And it is, because there are other possibilities.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. So how about we end for the day, guys? Shoot her ahead.
I will end the stream with a message to the audience. Eat your cereal.
Brother audience.
Oh, a brother audience. Eat your cereal, do your exercises, and don't forget to read your books.
Yeah, and eat something other than just fruit.
Yeah, because you don't want to be a fruit bat.
Cereal.
Exactly.
You don't want to be a raw mat fruit bat.
You don't want to look like a cancer patient. Okay, goodbye, cruel world.